All right, she continues to unpack the first day of the DA's Federal Congress. And of course, besides the leadership race, seen as a two-horse race between Dr. Mpho and John Steenhuisen tomorrow and all the other leadership posts up for grabs, this is also about DA policies, about how it will handle coalitions going into next year's elections. Crucial issues given what's been happening in municipalities of late. Our colleague Iman Rapeti is there in Midrand and she takes it live once more. Over to you, Iman.
Francis, thank you so much, and thank you to our Full View viewers for staying with us as we conclude our day one coverage of the DA's Congress taking place here at Gallagher Estates. I can tell you that the Congress auditorium has now emptied out, and I suppose a lot on the minds of their voting delegates about what's to unfold tomorrow. We heard from the incumbent, John Steenhuisen, for the federal leader position, talking tough, talking about having fixed the party, and then now focusing attention on fixing the country. And that was countered in a way by what we heard from the challenger, Dr. Mpho, talking about there still needing to be an addressing of the trust deficit inside the party and within society. So some interesting contrasts there, and we'll bring you some detailed analysis on that with Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu, who is with the Wits School of Governance. But my favorite part, how did it all play out on social media? And our very own social media guru, Stembiso Sitole, joins us this evening. Stay, it's always lovely to have you and watching you work, the room, so to speak, but also watching you work social media. Just give us a sense of what you were perceiving from social media altogether about the day that has been, day one.
I think let's start with the auditorium there, Iman, the mood there, the delegates, we saw them singing, excited with regards to the presentations that were made by the different leaders. And those who are not here, who are DA supporters, then of social media really interacting in terms of what they think of the Congress. But as we put those tweets on screen, the DA has been vocal and active on the social media account. The sentiments there has been that this was a well-run first day of the DA, for the fact that here we are alone, that people
3 hours early.
3 hours early, and that the delegates have went home. So a lot of people on social media commenting that, as you can see that on our tweet, on our screen there, basically saying this was a well-run first day of the conference. As we move into another tweet there, Peter, reflecting on that, Peter talking about that, saying this was actually exceptional, in Peter. So that sets the tone to simply say the delegates, even the DA supporters themselves, are impressed by this.
And what was the response to some of the things the DA was tweeting today?
Well, you would know that John was the first person to go there, make his presentation. Of course, I'm trying to persuade the delegates to provide the necessary support. And as you can see on the screen, there was a tweet that was sent that those who strongly believe that he can possibly win it, that tomorrow he would be announced as the DA leader once again. As we all know that he's running for the second term. Of course, there were those who were of the view that he might not, he's not fit. Others were really impressed by what Mpho said. As you can look into that picture, now reflecting on Mpho in between in terms of what they think of her. They were impressed by her speech. Those on social media really impressed by how she articulated herself. But the key question is, would that translate to what the delegates think tomorrow?
And that's interesting, Levi's tweet. I have the feeling that former Joburg Mayor Mpho will take it. There's some discussion about that, others believing, it's a shoe-in, it's a natural win for John Steenhuisen. And he was, I wonder what you think of the discussions, and we share that with our political team.
Yes.
This idea, I have served and I've worked 10 years as a councillor, I know my stuff. And Mpho, in a sort of veiled dig at him, she's got the qualifications and the experience to run with that task and
definitely
roles.
Some funny moments on social media, others even going further to say basically Dr. Mpho saying John is Jacob Zuma of the DA, of course, that in relation to the remarks that she made, that she's more qualified. Of course, I must say those are the sentiments of the viewers, not of the SABC, but it's those exciting, funny parts of the DA delegates, what they are thinking in terms of this conference. In social media, of course, DA Congress 2023 has been trending. There, of course, those in support and those who are believing that this time around Mpho will emerge.
It's interesting when you talk about those trends, and you will do potentially a proper diagnostic and some analytics on how those tweets were. But when you think about what people were writing about, besides the politics of personality, what were some of the other issues raised around this Congress?
I think one of them was that a lot of people are impressed that it's just going to take 2 days. But most importantly, at the same time...
the Congress that has a beginning and end.
Right, quick. But at the same time, they are also keen on trying to understand how the incoming leadership is also going to deal with the issues when it comes to black leaders leaving the party, the issue of load shedding, how are they going to unpack that? But most importantly, you'll recall that both of these both of these leaders who are contesting for this position have been vigorously talking about the campaign for 2024. So people on social media are really eager to find out what plans do they have practically in terms of 2024. As you said with the panelists, the predictions that they want to put the ANC below 50%, and that's the sentiment on social media seems saying, but how are you going to deal with that? But at the same time, a narrative coming on social media simply saying you don't want to cooperate with other political parties. How are you going to do that practically? And then that's a big question in regard to that. Say, how are you going to find a way to really make sure that you're out there if you're not keen to work with other political parties?
Because even though they're working on pursuing some electoral reform with regard to this, the reality is we are in a coalition context, politically speaking, in South Africa. So you're going to have to find your magic, your way somehow in managing all of these sometimes competing interests and very small parties being able to be the kingmaker when they haven't garnered enough votes as some of the other bigger players. When you think about the engagement altogether, you mentioned that the Congress was trending today. Was it an event that captured the imagination of a sufficient number of South Africans tonight, do you think?
I think, to be honest with you, yes, it's DA's trending, but there are other things that are happening in the country. And I think for me, what I also captured was, I think what is key, we're waiting for tomorrow, because today there was the issue of resolutions, the issue of political report. I think a lot of people are just interested in just finding the final decision, then they chant their way forward, so that then they can be able to make that decision in terms of who they want to vote for in between. But it's been a busy day. We look forward to what will take place tomorrow.
Thembiso, thank you very much for that wonderful wrap, and we'll be following all your tweets as well and your analysis tomorrow on what's happening, how this Congress is being interpreted from a social media perspective.
Definitely, Iman, I must also encourage our audiences that it's very important that we'll be streaming this once again from 8 o'clock.
We go where you go, SABC Plus app.
SABC Plus app, we are there, encouraging our audiences there. You might be on the go, not have time to watch, to really spend time. You can go there. Most importantly, go on the YouTube platform as well. Listen to SAFM with Bongiwe Zwane tomorrow. They will be unpacking that in between, just giving you the analysis so that you're not left behind.
And we certainly don't leave our viewers behind. Steer, thank you so much for that wonderful wrap of the day. As Steer says, no viewer left behind. We go where you go on the SABC Plus app. And also, if you've missed some of the big interviews and stories coming out of day one and the Congress here, you'll find it all on sabcnews.com and continue to engage with these subjects. The Congress only ends tomorrow, so we will certainly be sharing a lot of your feedback and insights on our social media that you've posted on our social media platforms too. Let me welcome my next and final guest for our special broadcast here in Gallagher Estate, Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu, who is with the Wits School of Governance. Good evening to you and welcome. It's been a long day, but not so long, because we've been given a few hours reprieve, ending a few hours earlier than expected. But it seemed highly efficient, as Thembiso and the other analysts were saying, well organized. They got where they needed to get. The question is, as we move into day two and this Congress concludes, have they got enough to be able to credibly build out their campaign for next year?
I think, according to them, they have, because they have confidence in what they are doing. They trust their systems, they trust their processes. But the bigger question is, how does that translate into reality? The conversation that you were having with Ste around what we've seen, the speeches, are talking to, is it the reality on the ground? So, for instance, if we pick the conversations from the two speeches, I think my best moment was the tossing of the coin, and then I was like, wow, that is so interesting. So when they are saying, when the DA slogan says it's an equal opportunity, it means the coin can actually decide the fate, of who speaks first and all of those things. So it was quite interesting for me. But what was key in that moment was the two different speeches that were coming from two competing candidates, but from different spaces, like you said. in your conversation said to say one was coming from I have led 10 years of experience. I'm here. We've fixed the DA, so we're moving to national. And then the other one saying, I don't think experience counts. I know experience counts, but also I'm educated and I have a vision for the party. And how then Dr. Palazzo then went down to break down the problems within the DA in terms of what is happening, how she positions herself. I think a big takeaway for me was to say, I'm going to work with the activists from the ground. I'm going to work with different working groups on the communities, and which is a very, a rare statement within the DA circles over the time, but also a conversation around qualifications when Stenizen said, we want to do away. I think he mentioned the 7 priorities, and then one of them, one of them was like, we want to do away with cadre deployment. So I was like, okay, how do you then, what is your approach to cadre deployment? What is cadre deployment in your own analysis in the DA? If the question of qualifications, I think the conversation that we had on SAFM in the afternoon with Solim Simang saying, it doesn't matter. People ask me about how are you going to translate things into action. They don't ask me about my qualification. So for me, that was a very big, moment to say, where do you stand in terms of this conversation?
I mean, you'll hear party stalwarts or veterans say, this diverse opinion is good for us. The tensions that are inherent between our different leaders and their leadership styles is a good thing. The problem might come beyond the optics, and that is in the substance of how the DA is moving forward in the way that it describes itself. If you go with John's gospel, and it's actually a gospel in the Bible, I'm not trying to be funny deliberately. Anyway, he says, all the bad things are behind us now, let's move forward. And then you have Mpho Palatse, and for all of the reasons that you say, these are 2 very different gospels. From those who see themselves back in the leadership position. How do you think that will go down with the delegates here that have the power to vote and decide who takes that lead position? Will they want to hear that the party still needs to work on trust, or will they want to hear that, sharp, we're on our way?
This is a very interesting moment for the DA, and it's also an important moment for them to capitalize on these 2 speeches, and in terms of how does it translate in real politics on the ground. They need the numbers. If they are going to go to the union building in 2024, they need the numbers, and a significant chunk of their population comes from the population that Mpho Palazzo was appealing to. And then what they already have in terms of numbers is what John Steenhuisen was speaking to. So they're going to strike a balance here in terms of where are they headed to, who are they representing, and whether are they going to get to parliament, to the union buildings, as a coalition party government. So one of the important things around that also is one thing that you touched on around different ideologies amongst different political parties. If they are going there, who is the candidate who's best positioned to strike important deals with coalition parties, with small parties, as they go to the union buildings? So here is to say whose ideology aligns with what you already have, and whose ideology aligns with what you are looking for, what you're missing. So they need to play a game of checking what they have and what they don't.
What's your perspective, Hlengiwe, on the growth that the DA is looking for? It was quite a sobering number that Mpho brought in there about the number of votes lost over the last 2 elections, a national and a local government election combined in the last while, 1.4 million. I mean, that's a fat amount of people. Can they galvanize the numbers that they want to in the lead up to this election credibly, do you think, given the disasters that we've had, the parties in Johannesburg, disasters that we've had in Tshwane, some of the losses that they've experienced down in the Western Cape?
So the assumption here is that the game of losing or gaining numbers has to do with preferences in terms of political parties. But I think over the last 2 local government elections, we are seeing that the numbers are declining, not because they're choosing either but people are refusing to vote. They are simply refusing with their vote. So it doesn't translate to we have small numbers because they went to ANC or they went to the DA or EFF. It's not like that. So in order for them to think about the loss that Mpho really spoke to, which is quite significant, for me, and quite important for the DA if they are to move forward, a lot of those decisions are going to lie in the decisions that are going to make tomorrow as they're electing their leaders in terms of who are they getting on board, how are they planning, to cover ground, because as you are referring to the coalition failure, the South Africans were sitting here looking at national government next year, and then we're looking at what is happening at the municipalities, and you imagine that happening at a national level. It's so scary, and the decisions that they are going to be making here are very key in terms of who are they taking on board and who do they decide to leave out.
Earlier conversation, we looked at this sort of bank of resolutions and amendments that the DA is looking for. Some of them pertain to their own party processes, and some of them pertain to some of their bigger, desires and concerns around topical issues, like the independence of the SAB, like the Russia-Ukraine war, and what South Africa's position should be on that, and a number of different things. But one wonders whether there has been enough work done in this very short Congress, whether it was even the purpose of some of that work to be done, to begin to appeal to people out there, outside of the DA's circles. Do you think they accomplished that?
Well, that's why when we started the conversation, I said, according to them, they think they did. But I think there is a lot to cover. And the question is, there is no time really between, as we are saying, between this Congress and the 2024 elections. From here onwards, they are on the ground campaigning, to get the votes. Have they done the work, as you are asking? I don't think they've done the work. Maybe they have a different view. Maybe the work is done elsewhere outside, on these other different groupings. But we are yet to see in terms of how does that unfold, because this is the space where they're supposed to assert their position politically and strategically position themselves, to lead the country. And those resolutions are very important, that some of them and the critical ones be dealt with, where at least there is a collaborative space with everyone else in the room.
That issue of a trust deficit that Mpho Phalatse was alluding to seems to be an issue that really is a big one, singularly for the party. And in fact, in my conversation with Helen Ziller, who is the Federal Council chair and likely to be again after tomorrow, she's contesting unopposed, there was also that acquiescence around building closer relationships with the communities in which they are visible, beginning to walk in their shoes, so to speak, or living in their experience in a way. Again, with the time being so short, those might not bear dividends in the short term. How do they get that right? I mean, you think about trust. What are some of the things they need to be doing?
Well, of course, number one is trust. And whether they can build trust, I think they have it in their own way. But, they tend to speak to us a lot about what they've done. But the question is, they've done for who? They point to the communities and all where they've done the work. But we're yet to see how that work reflects to broader South African society as a whole, because 80% of South Africans, they are at the margins of society. That's where they exist. So we're yet to see the actual work visibly work. So in addition to trust, right, that they seek to build, we also need to see how they reflect on some of the important issues, like the gender equity issue. That's why I had to go back to the coin moment to say, how do you are contesting a black woman, and then you're sitting there and then you toss a coin and it's okay because we have an equal opportunity. What if the coin went otherwise? So those are some of the things. What are they doing in terms of
you think the coin was rigged? No, I'm just joking. But I hear what you're saying, that there should have been more of a deliberate intent behind who spoke first?
Yes. Not... Of course, it was Mpho's choice, right? I don't think they should have tossed the coin. They should have asked her, do you want to talk first or last? But also, if you read their 2021 local government election manifesto, I read the document, and then because I was writing a paper about the gender issue within the local municipalities and local governance. And for me, I'm yet to get something concrete in terms of what are the plans around the issue of youth and around the issue of gender. So I haven't seen that playing out, and I think those are other important strategic positions that are lacking in other political parties across, and that they should, strategize and then capitalize on, in that effect. So that's important for me.
Do you think that there is enough, beyond the hubris, that there is enough technical detail in how a party which is poised to govern, you heard them say, we want to be the government, and we actually think, well, not the government, we want to be the largest party, which in effect would mean the government, that they are ready to govern, and that where they have governed, and they will famously quote the Western Cape, there are services, the city of Cape Town has notched up accolade after accolade for around good governance and so on. Is there enough of the detail beyond the promise to sway, especially the kinds of people you're referring to who make up the majority of our country, who exist every day on the periphery?
Yeah, on one hand there is politicking, and then on one hand there is the actual plan, because one of the biggest problems that we're having in South Africa is to have these grand plans. They are so lucrative when you look at them. They look so special, they look so important, but the implementation part, and it's not just at the implementation stage, it's where you even lacking, the strategy. You're not telling us the strategy, you're just telling us that you're going to do A, B, C, D, but we're like, okay, everyone has said that. Give us something new. How are you going to do it? And the how part for me is still missing, and it's something that we're yet to see, as opposed to what we've seen, to just oppose what the DA has done against what the ANC has done. Beyond that, how are you planning to deliver what you are talking about?
What's so interesting, Hlengiwe, is that sometimes the lived experience may not translate into how someone decides to vote. And people could decide for a million reasons why they will go even with a party that they feel hasn't delivered for them. It seems as if we are in a very peculiar situation in South Africa in terms of how people vote, and beginning to create predictions on who might make it and who might not is risky business in this country, because the voting public is incredibly hard to read sometimes.
Yes, it's becoming very, very difficult each and every Congress to say who's going to emerge on that space, and because of representation politics, because we're thinking about who is governing, and we're thinking about representation politics, and the people who are coming here to vote, who are being delegated to vote, they will come here and make decisions on behalf of millions of South Africans, of millions of supporters who are behind, who stay behind at home. And then when they come here, a lot of lobbying happens, but also they also individuals who carry their own interest. So in order for you to make it to the Congress, what does it take? How do you get to be nominated? How do you qualify in all of this? And when you get here, at what extent do you carry the agenda that you took back from home and then bringing it here? That's important.
Tomorrow's going to be a big day, and we'll wait to see, which gospel, the voting delegates here have decided to put their support behind. Hlengiwe, it's lovely having you, and thank you for your analysis tonight. We really appreciate it. Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu, who is with the Wits School of Governance. And that elegantly, I think, wraps up our coverage here on day one of the DA's Federal Congress, playing itself out at Gallagher Estate. And please do join us again from tomorrow early morning as we kick off our coverage once more. And don't forget, as Stair said, and I can see him to the left of the camera, saying follow us on the SABC Plus app. The event is streaming live on our YouTube channel. If you've missed anything, go to sabcnews.com. Tweet. Let us know what you're thinking using the hashtag FullView, but also the SABC. Thank you. Have a good night. From all of us here at Gallagher Estate, Francis, it's back to you.